welcome back to Meat Market Minutes. We've got our group of economists around the Southeast all working together on, talking about what's happening in all these protein markets. And what we're going to do now is talk about what's happening in the dairy market and market for dairy products. And we're going to have Andrew Griffith from University of Tennessee discuss that today. So, Andrew, I'll go ahead and throw it over to you.
Thank you, Justin. I realize that dairy is not really a meat market, but what produces dairy turns into a meat market, and still some protein there. So we're going to cover several things really, really quickly. The two things we're going to talk about is some of the changes in dairy consumption, mainly in the form that it is and in how much is being consumed, as well as where it's being consumed and why certain products are not being consumed. Is kind of what we'll touch on in this very brief deal. We just look at two. This is just an overview of total milk products and on a milk equivalent basis on a per capita consumption of dairy products in the United States. So if we get down to it, since 1975 up to 2019, essentially 44 years that we're looking at there, 45 years that we're looking at there, we've seen about 114 pound increase in dairy per capita consumption on a milk equivalent basis. At that same time, we've watched fluid beverage milk decrease over 106 pounds per person. And so what we know is we see dairy consumption increasing, but we know it's not at the fluid base. And actually we've lost 100 pounds and we've gained 100. So we've got a 200 pound difference now somewhere in there. And to see what's actually happening, let's just look at all those different products. And so what we really notice is the biggest change is in cheese other than American cheese. American type cheese per capita consumption has increased, but when you really get down to it, it's that other cheese that has really taken off, looking to the tune of about 15 pounds per person over that time. One thing that was a little surprising as I was looking at this, I didn't expect ice cream to have fell off as much as it did, and I also looked at low fat ice cream, but I didn't think it was worth putting on this graph because it had not really changed over this 45-year period. But we have seen a decline in just ice cream. I can't say that I've declined. I probably eat more ice cream than I used to. We also have seen quite a bit of increase in butter, and that's more recent. I like butter on everything that I eat. Probably the thing that when I first started into this job, David Anderson just harped on this yogurt, increase in consumption in yogurt. And man, it's took off in the early 2000s. It really took off. But now if we look at the past 5 or 6 years, we've seen where it plateaued, and now it's actually seen a slight decrease, and we're starting to see a little more negative trend to that. Now, again, I expect most of these trends that we've seen over this 45-year period to continue into 2020. Now, I wanted to show cheddar cheese prices here, and this is the 500-pound block. I should have probably put the 40-pound block on here as well, but what I want to note in here is not necessarily the price. The prices have actually recovered very, very well because, like I said, there is a really strong demand for cheese. But typically, 500-pound blocks sell at a premium to 40-pound blocks. And in the past year, we've actually seen that flip-flop. And I think that has a lot to do with the destination of where that product is going. A lot of these products end up we buy a lot of cheese out of the grocery store, but a lot of these are going to food service, going to restaurants, and so a lot of these bigger blocks of cheese are going into those places where they're using copious amounts of cheese at one time. Similar to butter, though. We see a whole lot more butter use in those restaurants than probably even what we use at home. But I think people are realizing that they're having to use those at home the less they eat out because they realize it does actually add a lot of flavor to a lot of foods. So looking at cheese and cold storage, we're at very manageable levels. They're similar to a year ago. They're higher than what we would call the 5-year average, but they're still manageable levels. A lot of that additioning cheese and cold storage is going to be mainly due to the fact that we're not moving it into those restaurants. We've had a lot of production. And I'll briefly talk about the fact that, we haven't really seen a decline in this dairy production. Butter prices are low. Again, that comes back to that same thing of where is it being consumed, and that strong demand, that large quantity demand is just not there for a lot of those food service industries. Butter and cold storage is up, another reason why prices are a little soft. So butter and cheese, mainstays in restaurants and food service. We continue to have reduced disappearance at those venues. I mean, and I think we're going to continue to see that because, it's nice to have a steak cooked in butter. I mean, it's great. But there's not a whole lot of people that are going to restaurants to say, I want to take out steak to take home with me, because by the time you get home, it's cold. And nobody wants to eat a cold steak. I mean, well, I take that back. I still eat cold steaks because they're delicious. But, I mean, if you're going to pay, if you're going to pay $12 a pound for it, or whatever you're paying at the restaurant, then you want it to be, you want it to be fresh off the griddle kind of deal. So, we're going to see where these fast food entities have been a beneficiary. You think about it, Sonic has always been a socially distanced entity. It never at one point. So this didn't impact their business at all. But that there's more cheeseburgers being consumed today than there were, 8, 9 months ago before this thing hit, because that's what the business we're in. So bottom line, dairy product prices are actually holding pretty well given the circumstances that we're in. And I can't say that we've seen where dairy producers are really giving us a strong indication that they're going to reduce production to support these dairy product prices. So with that, I'll open it up if anybody has any questions.
Yeah, Andrew, how much do you think some of these federal government kind of purchase programs have had on dairy prices to support? And is it more supportive than what maybe the fundamentals would suggest?
Well, there's no doubt it's supporting the market. And let me couple that, because we talk about these dairy support programs, and you're specifically talking about a lot of those that were associated with coronavirus.
Yeah, the purchasing programs.
But at the same time, you have to remember the school food lunch program, and the fact that they maintained that. Yeah, David, I know where you get that fresh squeezed milk. Yeah, I know. You got a cow in your backyard.
My favorite bumper sticker of all time.
But James, the thing of it is the fact that we kept the school lunch program moving and milk moving through there, plus it has definitely helped support these dairy farms. Now, you still read a lot of popular press that says, hey, no, they're in rough times, and I'm sure they are in tough times. But when you really get down to it, a lot of these farms' income is not. I mean, they have other things too, and so they've been supported otherwise, and so it has helped cash flow. All those programs have helped cash flow, because how many dairies do you know that don't also shell some corn? In Tennessee, it's not. Now I realize some of those huge dairies that maybe they're not doing that, but these smaller dairies, that's why they're staying in business, because they're getting all these other programs as well.
I think also if you look at the number of dairy cows that have been going through the meat system, it's down quite a bit from April or May to now. Something like 10% down, I believe, over last year, 9% down. So I think we're seeing enough support in these non-fluid dairy products that there's an incentive there, which, and we're moving into Christmas, which, right, a lot of cheese, a lot of milk, a lot of butter consumption.
I think it's really interesting, you look at the per capita consumption numbers like you showed, Andrew, and if you dig down into the fluid milk part, there's evidence of increasing consumption of whole milk, and folks moving back to a whole milk and away from the skim milk product in terms of, for me, I certainly like the whole milk product, the taste, they talk about mouthfeel in some of the tests and things, the idea that so many of the vitamins in milk are, fat soluble vitamins. I just think, I think it's interesting that I think consumers have moved away from some of the fat concerns. And I think that relates to whole milk consumption increasing. And I think that relates to the butter consumption increasing as well. Really maybe some less concerns about fat and that's some progress along the lines too of just, moving more dairy products.
I think when we realize that consumer preference is a huge player in demand. You learn that in Econ 201, right, or whatever it is. And what you find out is consumer presence is key. Now, the rest of us, other than David, in our lifetime, when we were kids, margarine was the product. Well, now it's come back to butter, because when David was a kid, it was butter. And And I think he's exactly right. 3.5% milk fat is a lot more soothing to the mouth because it actually has a smooth, it's a smooth texture. Whereas that 1% skim, it's a very watery texture, which is not as smooth.
Well, we're going to have to wrap it up right there. This is a great presentation. This is the most we've talked about dairy, I think, on one of these videos. It's really good. So appreciate it, Andrew, and hopefully we'll catch y'all all on the next video, our Meat Market Minutes. Thanks for joining us.